If you listen to my most recent commentary on what possibly could happen once the rapture takes place, you remember that I mentioned that both Syria and Iran will probably most likely make an agreement either with the United States beforehand or after the tribulation period begins with the Antichrist. There are more and more reports coming out, credible reports from viable intelligence sources that are saying Syria is beginning to crumble, and Bashar Assad's regime could be falling very soon. That would be bad news for the Iranian government, and it wouldn't be good news for Russia either, since they have a number of ports that they have opened up in on Syrian soil. So I'm not so sure where that's going to lead. But getting back to what I was talking about, this would be a major blow for the Iranian government because it would possibly lend a stepping off point for Allied forces and for the West. Some are now saying that this eventuality is now lending to the possibility that Iran may be open to making a deal with the West. In fact, this is what Stratfor intelligence report says. It says, from the Iranian point of view, this raises the risk of that the sphere of influence Tehran is pursuing. Now we're talking about just in case the Syrian government does fall, will be blocked by the fall of the Assad regime. This would not pose a fundamental challenge to Iran so long as its influence in Iraq remains intact, but it would represent a potential high water mark in Iranian ambitions. It could open the door to recalculations in Tehran as to the limits of Iranian influence and the threat to their national security. I must not overstate this. Events in Syria have not gone that far, and Iran is hardly backed into a corner. Still, it is a reminder to Tehran that all might not go the Iranians' way. Now here's a little speculation on the part of the Stratfor report. It's talking about a possibility of negotiations. It is in this context that the possibility of negotiations has risen. The Iranians have claimed that the letter the U.S. administration sent to Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei that defined Iran's threats to Strait of Hormuz as a red line contained a second paragraph offering direct talks with Iran. After hesitation, the United States denied the offer of talks, but it did not deny it had sent a message to the Iranian leadership. The Iranians then claimed such an offer was made verbally to Tehran and not in the letter. Washington again was not categorical in its denial. On Friday, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said during a meeting with the German foreign minister, "We do not seek conflict. We strongly believe the people of Iran deserve a better future. They can have that future. The country can be integrated into the global community when their government definitively turns away from pursuing nuclear weapons." From our perspective, that would be Stratfor, this is a critical idea. As we have said for several years, we do not see Iran as close to having a nuclear weapon. They may be close to being able to test a crude nuclear device under controlled circumstances, and we don't know this either. But the development of a deliverable nuclear weapon poses major challenges for Iran. Moreover, while the Iranians may aspire to a deterrent via a viable nuclear weapons capability, we do not believe the Iranians see nuclear weapons as militarily useful. A few such weapons could devastate Israel, but Iran would be annihilated in retaliation. While the Iranians talk aggressively, historically they have acted cautiously. For Iran, nuclear weapons are far more valuable as a notional threat and bargaining chip than as something to be deployed. Indeed, the ideal situation is not quite having a weapon, and therefore not forcing anyone to act against them, but seeming close enough to be taken seriously. They certainly have achieved that. The important question, therefore, is this. What would the United States offer if Iran made meaningful concessions on its nuclear program? And what would Iran want in return? In other words, forgetting the nuclear part of the equation, What did Hillary Clinton mean when she said that Iran can be reintegrated into the international community, and what would Iran actually want? Now, it's important to recall that in our view, which is Stratfor's, nuclear weapons never have been the issue. Instead, the issue has been the development of an Iranian sphere of influence following the withdrawal of the United States from Iraq, and the pressure Iran could place on oil-producing states on the Arabian Peninsula. Iran has long felt that its natural role as leader in the Persian Gulf has been thwarted, first by the Ottomans, then the British, and now by the Americans, and they have wanted to create what they regard as the natural state of things. The United States and its allies do not want Iran to get nuclear weapons, but more than that, they do not want to see Iran as the dominant conventional force in the area, but able to use its influence to undermine the Saudis. With or without nuclear weapons, the United States must contain the Iranians to protect their Saudi allies. But the problem is that Iran is not contained in Syria yet, and even were it contained in Syria, it is not contained in Iraq. Iran has broken out of its containment in a decisive fashion, and its ability to exert pressure in Arabia is substantial. Assume for the moment that Iran was willing to abandon its nuclear program. What would the United States give in return? Obviously, Clinton would like to offer an end to the sanctions, but the sanctions on Iran are simply not that onerous, with the Russians and the Chinese not cooperating, and the United States being forced to allow the Japanese and others not to participate fully. But it goes deeper. This is a historical opportunity for Iran. It is the first moment in which no outside player or power is in a direct position to block Iran militarily or politically. Whatever the pain of sanctions, trading that moment for lifting the sanctions would not be rational. The threat of Iranian influence is the problem, and Iran would not trade that influence for an end into sanctions. So assuming the nuclear issue was to go away, what exactly is the United States prepared to offer? The U.S. has assured access to oil from the Persian Gulf, not only for itself but also for the global industrial world, since World War II. It does not want to face a potential interruption of oil for any reason, like the one that occurred in 1973. Certainly, as Iran expands its influence, the possibility of conflict increases, along with the possibility that the United States would intervene to protect its allies in Arabia from Iranian-sponsored subversions or even direct attack. The United States does not want to intervene in the region. It does not want an interruption of oil. It also does not want an extension of Iranian power. It is not clear that Washington can have all three. So what does Iran want? Well, Iran wants three things too. First, it wants the United States to reduce its pressure in the Persian Gulf dramatically. Having seen 2 U.S. interventions against Iraq and one against Afghanistan, Iran is aware of U.S. power and the way American political sentiment can shift. It experienced the shift from Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan, so it knows how fast things can change. Tehran sees the United States in the Persian Gulf coupled with U.S. and Israeli covert operations and destabilization campaigns as an unpredictable danger to Iranian national security. Second, the Iranians want to be recognized as the leading power in the region. This does not mean they intend to occupy any nation directly. It does mean that Iran doesn't want Saudi Arabia, for example, to pose a military threat against it. Third, Iran wants a restructuring of oil revenue in the region. How this is formally achieved, whether by allowing Iranian investment in Arabian oil companies, possibly financed by the host country, or some other means, is unimportant. What does matter is that the Iranians want a bigger share of the region's vast financial resources. The United States doesn't want a conflict with Iran. Iran doesn't want one with the United States. Neither can be sure how such a conflict would play out. The Iranians want to sell oil. The Americans want the West to be able to buy oil. The issue really comes down to whether the United States wants to guarantee the flow of oil militarily or via a potential accommodation with the country that could disrupt the flow of oil, namely Iran. That in turn raises two questions. First, could the United States trust Iran? And second, could it live with withdrawing the American protectorate on the Arabian Peninsula, casting old allies adrift? When we listen to the rhetoric of American and Iranian politics, it is difficult to imagine trust between them. But when we recall the U.S. alliance with Stalin and Mao or the Islamic Republic's collaboration with the Soviet Union, we find rhetoric is a very poor guide. Nations pursue their national interests, and while those interests are never eternal, they can be substantial. Even though this potential alliance is difficult, it's not out of the question. Iran's ultimate interest is security against the United States and the ability to sell oil at more substantial profit. This would entail an easing of sanctions and a redefinition of how oil revenues in the region are distributed. The United States' ultimate interest is access to oil and manageable prices that do not require American military intervention. On that basis, Iranian and American interests are not that far apart. Frankly, I believe once the rapture of the church, of course we're talking speculatively now, when the rapture of the church takes place, I believe that when the rise of the Antichrist does take place, that this deal, although it seems impossible, will come to fruition. I think Iran and the United States will come to a happy medium. I think that Israel will also be among those who will make a very large peace deal. That at this time seems very much an impossibility. But the Bible is clear in Daniel 9:27 that one day, once the Antichrist does step forward, that he will make a peace accord with Israel and many, and it will last for 7 years, but will be cut off halfway through the peace accord. I also have to say that I agree with the Stratfor report. Even though Iran probably will at some point in time come up with a nuclear device of some sort, they're in no shape or form do they have the ability to be a major threat to Israel in the near future. So it's not really something. I think it's more rhetoric than anything else by Israel. They would like to eliminate Iran's nuclear threat, even though it be modest. But I think most in the intelligence world know that anything that Iran comes up with at this time, even though it would be a substantial threat, Israel would the use of something of this nature would bring about a humongous retaliation that Iran would never be able to recover from. So I don't believe that Iran is in any way, shape, or form in a hurry to attack Israel because of the retaliatory consequences. That is why I see this possibility as something that is viable. Frankly, I look for a deal with Iran to be struck between the West, but most likely it will not take place until after the rapture of the church takes place. This is Terry Malone with the Calvary Prophecy Report.